How are you tonight, Frank?
How are you, sir?
Well, it's fine, and aloha from Hawaii.
I was just going to say, Frank, it's about 15 degrees here. The wind chill is about -5. Tell everyone how the weather is in Hawaii tonight. This afternoon, I should say.
Well, I'm sitting here in shorts, and it's I think it's about 74 right now.
Oh, you dirty dog.
It's been so miserable, yes.
Oh, I tell you. Little background for our viewers on Frank Sullivan. Spent 11 seasons in the majors between 1953 and 1963. Won 97 games lifetime with a 3.6 ERA. Appeared in 351 games, starting 219 of them. 73 complete games, which is a thing of the past, Tony.
What's a complete game?
In 1955, Frank led the AL in wins, innings, and games started. A magical year in which he went 18-13, 2.9. Actually pitched in the All-Star game. We'll get to that in a minute. From 1954 to 1958, Frank never won less than 13 games. Through 15 career shutouts, played with such notables as Jackie Jensen, Ted Williams.
Yep.
I don't know where to start, Frank. Let's start with one of the most recent honors you had back in November, elected to the Red Sox Hall of Fame. I know your wife, Marilyn, said, quote unquote, you were in awe of that. Tell us how that came about and what kind of experience it was to be a Red Sox Hall of Famer.
Well, it was spooky good, as you can imagine. It came out of the blue. I was actually standing here in my kitchen, and I got a call, and the guy said, "This Frank Sullivan?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, this is Dick Brascani, and the committee just voted you into the Hall of Fame." And I was standing around here crying like a baby. So, yeah. It was like being admitted back into a family you never wanted to leave.
I could understand that. Having played the majority of your career with the Red Sox, it must have been tough to leave, Frank. But, you know, there's some great names in that Red Sox Hall of Fame. I guess Greenwell went in when you did, right? One of the more modern players.
Yes, Mike Greenwell, Mo Vaughn, and Bill Lee.
Well, Spaceman Lee.
He's
up here on the East Coast here. But it's just a tremendous honor. I was reading about it, and you know, you mentioned Mr. Brascani there. He actually, I got to tell our viewers, Frank's new book, Life is More Than 9 Innings. I have a copy right here, where Brascani actually wrote in that book. He had a good quote, Tony. It said, "Frank Sullivan is a Red Sox Hall of Fame pitcher who is now on the way to becoming a Hall of Fame storyteller."
Yes.
And I want to tell the viewers about the book because it has these small one-page snippet chapters which are so terrific to read.
It's such a fast-moving, good quality. Any chapter stands on its own merits.
Absolutely, Frank. And I've skimmed at least half the book. I was at a high school basketball game the other night, and I brought the book with me, and I just got into it, and I couldn't stop reading it. You have chapters on Vince Scully, who actually went to the same university I did, Fordham University. He's just a god down there. Yeah. You talked about the '55 All-Star game when you pitched against Gene Conley, who was a former guest on our show here.
I saw that interview. It was great.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you very much.
And tell us, we might as well start there, Frank. Tell us about that '55 All-Star game. Conley was the winning pitcher. You pitched really good, but you just gave up one home run too many to a guy named Musial, right?
Well, I was only following Mantle's advice. When I went into the game, I had to walk past Mick because the bullpen in Milwaukee was out towards center field anyway. He said, "We got to get this over. Cocktail hours."
That sounds like Mantle, yeah. Oh, that's something. But, you know, and it's funny, tell our viewers, Gene, Gene Conley and yourself were once traded for each other. They call it the biggest trade in baseball history because you guys were the tallest guys out there, correct?
Yeah, you know, I've never met Gene in person. But we talk all the time.
Yeah.
On our email stuff and everything, we become, you know, email chums and friends. And but I have to talk through his wife, Katie.
Exactly.
He's too lazy.
Yeah, I've noticed that. He sent me a letter the other day. I had sent him an article that appeared here in the Hartford Courant, and he very gracious. He sent me a nice letter. But yeah, Katie does a lot of his groundwork. But hey, you know, he says it's tough to move that 6'8" body like it used to be. But there's these chapters I went through them. There was a danger of pitching where you talked about guys who used to hit it straight through the box. You talked about back to Fenway, the time in 2005. That was your first live baseball game. You came back to Fenway, Frank, since you were with the Twins in '63.
Yeah.
That must have been some experience too.
Yeah, it was spooky good. I don't know why, but I had this feeling I wanted to do it by myself. So, and living with my bride all these years, I knew she'd know more about that than I. But I went in and stayed in the Commonwealth Hotel overnight, and then walked into the ballpark by myself, and it was a pretty poignant moment for me.
Yeah, it's a place where you had so many great memories. You're watching Monday Night Sports Talk. As we talk to Frank Sullivan, we'll have some pictures. We'll show a collage of pictures from his career on the screen. Tony, question for Frank.
And Frank, and thanks so much for being with us. The story, I mean, there's so many great stories in your book, but the one that particularly really caught me was, is it really true that you had built your arm back by throwing hand grenades in the Army?
Well, I don't know, but it did come back, and I threw a ton of them. I threw a ton of them. Yeah, the commander found out I could throw an airburst with a grenade, so I could throw grenades into draws and stuff close by.
Yep.
That would keep we didn't have to fire our mortars.
I understand.
That's
quite a story.
It's a different era, Tony.
It certainly is.
And this book is terrific. People, for the people that just want to read snippets, it's terrific. More information, morethan9innings.com, or you can go to Hawaii.
Well, you know why I wrote those one-page stories is because that's all I can read before the book hits me in the face at night.
Well, it works, Frank. It's really terrific, and I'm looking at some of the people you play with over the years, and I'd be remiss, Frank, if I didn't talk about Ted Williams. Obviously, has the biggest name. There's a great picture of you and him in the book.
Right.
Just tell our viewers what it was like being with probably the greatest hitter of all time.
Well, it was, they can put their own thoughts in there when you're seeing something like that. The way he could hit a baseball, it was just scary. I think the worst I ever saw was 0 for 9.
The biggest slump.
Biggest slump.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And if he went 0 for 6, he hired a pitcher to come into the ballpark, and he would actually make his hands bleed hitting.
Yeah, that's.
I mean, this guy was more than dedicated. He was a hitting machine.
Oh, it's beyond. My father he tells me the stories. I mean, he was a Red Sox fan growing up in a Yankee household, but it was always Ted Williams, and it just never stopped. And Jimmy Pearsall, who you play with also, Frank, native of Connecticut, this area.
Yeah.
Actually, my father saw him play up at Ansonia High School one year.
Wow.
I said he was just a tremendous outfielder. Tell us about his fielding skills. Jimmy Pearsall, one of Connecticut's own, Frank.
Yeah, well, Jimmy was the center fielder, and unfortunately, I got to see his large number a lot. That means he was running back when I was pitching.
the back of you, okay.
I shouldn't tell the thing if I got to explain it, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but I hear you, though. He was something.
Yeah.
Covered a lot of ground, according to the people I talked to. Pearsall.
What?
He can go get him. I mean, he covered a lot of ground from what everyone's told me.
Yeah.
Just a great outfielder, and go ahead, Tony.
Yeah, and Frank, it's out of all the guys that you faced when you were pitching, I mean, I'm going to ask you probably one or two questions.
Sure.
You're facing Mantle at Fenway, and what are you thinking? What's going through your mind?
Well, not much. I had a lot of success with Mickey. He didn't like my herky-jerky motion, and anyway, I think he only hit 4 home runs off me in the 8 years, and but one of them damn near went out of. Almost broke the back wall in Fenway Park. But I wasn't intimidated. The hardest thing about pitching to the Yankees in those years is they had a whole bunch of 270, 280 hitters that could all hit the ball long.
Yeah.
And it was wearing on you. You never had a couple of, Punch and Judy guys that you could play with.
Anybody can
And,
swing a bat, yeah.
And then they had so solid pitching that if you let in a couple of runs, you were in dire trouble.
And you
So
mentioned
I struck Mantle out the first 3 times I threw to him. In the first game I ever started in Yankee Stadium. I struck him out the first 3 at bats.
wow.
And I'm standing on the mound saying, where's all the press coming from this guy?
This is easy, yeah. Mickey who?
Yeah. And then he hit one so far up in the bleachers in Yankee Stadium, I couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
I thought the ball should have been caught, but it just kept going and going and going.
Jeez. And
Anyway,
you mentioned your success against the Yankees, and on this staff with you, who you mentioned in the book, Frank, was Willard Nixon.
Yes.
One of your friends. He dominated Mantle, Skowron, Bauer, Berra. You mentioned in the book. What I found, and this is the difference in the times, Tony. Nixon had to work in the off season as a chemist in a textile mill. And
Right.
Frank in the book, said pay was somewhat less than $252 million. But it's that kind of, and that's the great thing about the book, Frank,
About
is the
the era of
characters you
baseball,
bring
yeah.
out. And another one was, the name of it was Characters of a Chapter.
Yeah.
And you talk about Clint Courtney now. Courtney, you could tell him the story, Frank, about how he offered you a ride to the train station.
We came, I played with Clint in Mexico.
Okay.
He could speak Spanish fluently, and I mean, he was our manager because he could do all that. And he was you could hit him in his Adam's apple. He didn't care as long as he won.
Boy,
And
tough guy.
But anyway, he was playing for Washington, and of course we're in there, and in those days there's no air conditioning and everything. It's just the heat in Washington D.C. in those days would just eat you alive.
Yeah.
At any rate, I came out of the clubhouse. I was a little late. I pitched. I was pouring sweat, and I came out of the clubhouse, and I was looking for a cab, and here Courtney came out. Now, he wouldn't speak to me on the field because, that's the way he was. Mm-hmm. But he said, "Hey, Frank, come on over out." He said, "What are you standing around here for?" I said, "Well, I got to get a ride to the train station because we're leaving." "I'll take you." "Oh, okay, Clint." So we go over to this beautiful white, brand new Cadillac, and he jumps in, and he opens the door to let me in, and it's the smell that came out of there was, I had an old friend that used to call those daytime beer bars toilets.
Yeah.
At any rate, I got in the car because I had no choice but to get to the thing, and finally I said to Clint, Clint, how many? I said, "Nice car," and he said, "Yeah, I get a new one every year." And I said, "But how many cans do you think are back in there in the back seat?" And he said, "Well, what's 6 times the games we've played so far?" There must have been, I don't know. This was almost the end of the season. The thing was piled all the way up to the seats.
It's a good incentive for a trade-in. We ought to call General Motors and let them know.
Hey. He was something else. He was he was really fun to be around.
He sure is. You're watching Monday Night Sports Talk, or we're on the phone with Frank Sullivan from his home in Hawaii. Frank, you settled in Hawaii some 40 years ago and actually worked as a PGA golf pro. You've built and designed courses out there. Tell us how was golfing something you did over here on the mainland as a ball player, and is that what got you into it in Hawaii?
No, I did play a couple of times when I was a ball player, but nothing. No, I would just I got out here with no. When you're 33 and you don't have a profession and you're through in one sport, you got to go somewhere and hack out a new life. And I didn't have a college degree, although I spent a couple of semesters in college. But I didn't. I was a jock, a dumb jock, and so I got the opportunity to go up and work as an assistant in a golf shop, and from there on, I took it from there and learned something. So, and then I never designed any of the courses, but I had a lot to do with the building
The
of
building of them.
yeah, of 4.
But you must have played a lot of golf, Frank, to have become at least a decent pro out there. I mean, that's pretty impressive. And I've been to Hawaii 3 times, Tony, mostly on Oahu, and the courses there are beautiful. I could only imagine some of the beautiful courses you've been on, Frank.
Yeah, it's you know, Hawaii is a special place, and the views and the weather and the whole 9 yards. It's been a wonderful trip.
And I'd be remiss.
And I am the luckiest cat in the world because I worked for 5 different companies within a mile of my house on a small island over a 40-year period. Now tell me.
That's a lucky guy.
Certainly.
Oh,
I'm going to have you buy
unreal.
my next set of lottery tickets, Frank. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that Frank celebrated a birthday a month ago, Tony. You mind if I give you your age, Frank?
No.
Turned 79 a month ago, so
God
belated
bless him.
happy birthday, Frank.
Thank
Many
you.
more to come.
And happy
Yeah.
birthday, sir.
We got a couple more minutes, Tony. Question?
You know, and Frank, Bob and I always talk about what's wrong in baseball today, which usually is like a 3-hour discussion. If you could change 5 things or so in baseball yourself, not that I'm going to ask you to do 5, but
No,
what's maybe what are some of the things that come to mind?
First thing, and the only thing I think needs an asterisk in the rule book is they got to get the mound back up where it ought to be. Lowering the mound meant more. It took away more from pitching than any other item, including steroids. I'm telling you.
I can remember 1968.
We remember guys like Bob Gibson,
Yeah.
Frank,
Denny McQuain.
those kind of
Yeah.
guys who really benefited from them. And
Yeah.
I think of that, lowering the mound. I think
Sure.
of Bob Gibson, but you're
Hey,
right.
I did too. Everybody. I mean, when you're stepping downhill and throwing, you're going to increase your speed.
Boy.
Number one, and the ball isn't going to be in the hit zone as long from that angle. And because nowadays they got some great arms in the baseball now.
Yes, they do.
I mean, guys that can throw 97, 98 every throw, but they got to put this damn ball in that hit zone so long that they could hardly miss the damn thing.
Yeah, if the mound was higher, they probably wouldn't have as much pressure on the arm to throw that big.
In our days, you go into Chicago and Kaminsky Park because they didn't have much of an offense. They were all bunting and running and everything.
team
But
back
that
then,
mound, you could fall off of it and hurt yourself.
And Frank,
I mean-
being a big guy like yourself and Conley, I would think 6'7", you were kind of, hitters were in awe of these big guys. Did you think your height probably helped you out over those years?
Oh, absolutely, sure.
Yeah,
And, well, you can step closer to the home plate too. So,
Yeah,
but it's I think that one factor to me should be really looked at. But I can't argue with scoring more runs. I can't argue that the ballparks are packed. They're everywhere I look, and I watch baseball all the time. They're playing to huge crowds. We didn't play to that many people, so
That's for sure.
I can't knock what's going on in essence, but I think that's the one thing that there should be an asterisk in.
Frank, the time has totally flown by here. We got to sign off in a few minutes, but first of all, thanks again for
Thank
keeping
you
in
so much,
touch.
Frank.
We'll probably try to get you on again because there's a ton more questions we have here. Again, the best to your family, you dirty dog out there in Hawaii. But
Take that.
We'll think of you tonight when we leave the studio.
It'll get
Frank.
warmer here in about 3 months. But we'll be in touch, Frank. And again, thanks for
Okay.
coming on. The name of the book, Life is More Than 9 Innings, a collection of stories covering a lifetime of memories. Frank Sullivan. Thanks for being there, Frank, and we'll be talking to you.
Good evening.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Thank you, Tony. It was great.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.